been walking through the Navy Exchange and wonder why all the Naval Pride and Heritage gear is horrifically ugly and you wouldn't actually wear it? Have you ever wanted some really cool gear and you just don't know where to go? Well, I got you, fam. Go to dgutspodcast.com immediately. Get yourself some Naval Pride and Heritage gear you'll actually wear in public. We're working on new designs all the time, open to ideas. We're trying to create a brand that lets you display that pride but doesn't make you cringe. Also, if you're willing to and you're able to, please go to patreon.com/dgutspodcast, pick one of the 5 tiers and become a patron today. What's up, everybody? Let's spin some yarn. So first of all, sorry about last week. I didn't have a podcast out last week, and it's even late this week, obviously. It was a weird week. Bunch of personal stuff. Broke one of my teeth on some pretzels randomly, so I had to go get a crown unexpectedly, and just a bunch of other crap that I was just like one of those weeks where I was just like, maybe next week. And then I had recorded, I have a podcast in the bag with Damo from Permission to Speak Freely, and I'm having all the technical issues. Riverside, the service that I use for recording those remotely, just decided it didn't want to process the tracks correctly. So the video and the audio and I gotta do a bunch of wizardry with the audio editing to get it combined. So it's just like, that would have probably been out last week, but yeah, it's just, it's inbound. Also with the Chiefs season stuff. So we're still in the midst of it. It's like the last week, I believe. I think it's 28th is pinning. Don't quote me on that. I got it in a text message from Bob. But yeah, it's like, I'm going to wrap up all this Chiefs stuff. I promise. Of course, there'll be some stuff at the end. Yeah, the 29th. So it's the last week. There'll be some stuff like hot washing. Like Desiree, Ariana, and I, and maybe Bob will jump on and kind of just decompress and debrief their season experience, because they were both I'm very interested because I know them well enough. I believe that we've done this before. Like Chief Bob did one with Jesse and Riley when they made Chief, but I wasn't on that one, so that's one of the reasons why I'm excited about this too, because I didn't get to have that discussion. That was something Bob did on his own. But then also just and this isn't I think Jesse and Riley are hyper competent as well, but they're just, I know Desiree and Ariana are such hyper competent leaders that and they listen to the podcast so much and have talked to me so much that they went into the season with a lot more clarity on what this is and how it works, and kind of knew what was going on behind the curtain. So their experience was unique in that way. And I would argue probably more difficult because they knew those things. Like they had to suspend disbelief to get through it. So yeah, I'm very interested to have that conversation. Like I think them knowing what they knew from having listened to my podcast and had a bunch of discussions with me, I think it might have made it more difficult in many ways. I hope it enriched it too, but that's why I want to have the conversation. So that one will come to, but I'm definitely working on in the background the moral humility thing, which I got to go to some academic libraries. I have access to those because I'm a student right now too. To try to find more content on it or adjacent to it, because it's I just did some internet searches and all I could find was the same thing that I was already sent, so that TED Talk. But I want to do a little more research too, just to make sure that I'm capturing everything that I want to, I guess. So that'll be the next foundations. And yeah, there's more fun stuff coming, but I just want to let you guys know that so you don't think all this is ever going to be is Chief stuff. It's just 'tis the season, you know what I mean? And I'm getting a ton of people communicating with me and asking me questions about the Chief season. So that's what this one's about today. I had a senior chief reach out to me, and basically has a selectee that is reluctant for all the reasons that we talk about on the podcast, presumably. I mean, he doesn't get into a ton of detail, but he basically just said he listened to the not playing Spin the Yarn I did, where I was freaking out about you could just be an E7 but not a chief, and it's like that's an answer to anything ever. But he said, so he's a senior chief, currently has a select that they had to convince to go through the season, which again, not real. That I feel like some of these problems would be less of a problem if somebody somewhere, for fuck's sake, would just put out a policy document that says this is a mandatory training event. Thou shalt do the following, right? Which could just come from the CO, like a training memorandum, say like a lot of ships and commands do that, where they put out like quarterly training memorandums saying thou shalt do the following, or like we as a unit will do the following or whatever. But yeah, it's like this, just make it a lawful order, like formally. And that just deletes that whole decision tree, you know what I mean? Like, you will do it or you'll decline the promotion, which is another thing you can do. And that should be part of the policy document. Like, okay, if you don't want to do it, your options are this or go through the training event, like decline the promotion or go through the training event. So it kind of, it deletes this as even a point of contention or like any type of crisis that chiefs or selects are going to run into. It's like a very clear path. Like, you can do this or you can do this. The end. But yeah, it says this particular person has been a reluctant leader and has always excelled with the technical and professional capabilities. And their main shortcoming, if you can call it that, is a deep distrust with the mess and the Navy's leadership as a whole. Okay. Like, it's kind of what we do here, right? Like, it's you got to say the truth out loud. This is the thing that I think, like, this is like, the meme where somebody sticks the stick in the wheel of the bike and then they eat shit and then they're like, oh, they blame somebody else. I feel like that's what the mess has been doing for 100 years, and I mean, maybe back, 50, 60 years ago, it was just way better and then it slowly degraded. There's no way for me to really know that. Unless some like World War, post-World War II chiefs that are still alive and kicking and want to talk to me. That would be amazing. But it's like we're just consistently like self-sabotaging, eating shit, and then going, I don't know what happened. And so it's like, no, like, say it out loud. Just admit it. Sailors don't trust chiefs. And they have very good reasons to not trust chiefs and the mess and etc. Right. And it's not like you as an individual. You need to be able to detach that from the uniform that you wear, because it's like you're assuming an identity when you put that uniform on, even though I don't think you should conflate being a chief with your actual personal identity. It's you're putting on a team uniform, like you're on a sports team or something. Like, you're claiming membership in this organization, but you're an individual component of it, like an individual representative. So when they have issues with a chief that they encountered in the past, you're gonna have to overcome the scar tissue, right? And that's what this is. Like, this sailor has scar tissue, and all chiefs have to overcome that, for better or worse. Like, that's why it's so important to be a good steward of this thing, of being a chief and the mess as a whole, because everything you do affects everything everyone else does, right? Every interaction you have with a sailor informs how that sailor will interact with any chief they ever encounter in the future, right? So this sailor has some scar tissue, deep distrust with the mess and the Navy's leadership as a whole. After their decision to want to go through, which again, like, the only decision is you're going to decline the promotion or you're going to go through. But okay, like, we're pretending that like, and I'm not criticizing the senior chief. It's his command that decides how this is going to be handled. So this is apparently how they were going to handle, like, that this sailor gets a vote, I guess. Performed well and with some expected reluctance. However, this first week, because this email was a while back and I just kind of lost it in the shuffle. I responded to it last night, I think, finally, but then I'm doing this because I thought it was really interesting. I wish I would have done this sooner. But they hadn't gotten to what Chiefs call shock and awe events, right? So like this is the stuff I've mentioned before. So like the Meet the Mess is kind of like the first. It's generally like the first real mess event, because usually you'll have a couple of days of like a grace period. Sometimes it's only like one day. Sometimes it's the weekend. It depends on when results come out. It also depends on what command you're at, and I've found the more time that goes by, these periods get slightly longer. Like at my last command before I retired, the last season that I was actually around for, because I think it was going on as I retired. I can't remember because it's shifted around so much because of COVID and stuff, but now it's kind of back to a regular cycle. The last one I was really around for, the CMC, which is like a dude I look up to and I think is close to the ideal for a CMC as you could possibly be, besides my boy Eric. Shout out to Eric. He made it so that he's like, look, like today we're saying congratulations, shaking their hands, welcoming them, that kind of thing. And then they have the weekend to enjoy their family and just celebrate this achievement with their families. And then whatever day is Meet the Mess. And then that was like the first event. But it's very shocking in that Meet the Mess is usually like the first holy shit moment that the selects have, because that's when they start, like, that's when we start creating this artificial divide that I don't think is productive at all. And that's the kind of stuff that what it does is it just like reinforces the issues that sailors like this, and really I think this exists in pretty much every E6 and below in the entire freaking Navy. Maybe 99.9%. There's probably some outliers, those like super diggity dudes that are people that just like, they knew in boot camp they wanted to be in the Navy for 30 years kind of thing. Like those people exist. I don't know how, but they do. I wasn't even one of those guys. I was getting out at every re-enlistment. But yeah, it's like that. I think every sailor has this in them where when you do these things, like during the chief season, there's a lot of intentional pushing away of the selects. Like we're for what I passionately, vehemently disagree with this concept, but there's a lot of like pushing the selects away and making them feel like they're not a part of the mess. Like they have to knock and request permission to enter. And then when they enter, they have to like report, and they wear their selectee name tags and carry the backpacks and do all these things where, and I mean, they even used to have to, and some places I'm sure they're probably still doing it, even though I don't think they should, is like they do this thing where you have to call, like when it's only when you're behind the closed door of the mess. You have to do you have to call each chief. You say, honorable chief. And then you say, I think and it varies mildly, but it's like more honorable senior chief, and then most honorable and exalted master chief. And again, slight variations in how they do that exactly, depending on where you are. But it's absurd. It's gross. It's like the worst aspects of pride, and just like it's stupid. But that calling chiefs but holistically, that the idea that the first thing we do when selectees are selected, right, and which you need to kind of go in this with the context of they've already been selected by a board of master chiefs and senior chiefs, and senior chiefs have been sitting the 7 board for like 4 years, I think 5 years, something like that. I don't think they've been doing it for that long. But they've already been screened and selected and said, like, you will be a chief, right? Like, so there is no screening process happening, but a lot of the way that the initiation season is structured, it's structured as though it is a screening process, as though you're being selected, like they're grooming you to like enter the mess. But if you're not worthy, then, you're going to be an E7 and not a chief, which is a thing that for some maddening reason still exists in our vernacular. So when we do things like Meet the Mess or the trainings where they're just consistently being like punched in the face, metaphorically, for everything they do, no matter what they do. It doesn't matter how good you do what you do, or if you're correct, or if you follow the instruction or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter what you do or how you do it. They're just going to invent reasons that you did it wrong and then face punch you. And it's maddening for the selects in particular because it doesn't make any fucking sense. And they've already been selected. Like, they've already been told they're good enough. And then counterintuitively are being told that they're not good enough for 6 weeks. And then at the end, they want you to accomplish this symbolic moment of self-actualization that a lot of them treat like it's literal. And then be like, I am worthy. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, the whole thing is it's such a waste of time and energy in its current revision. And the point I was trying to make, took a long time for me to get here, is that behavior throughout the 6-week season, it only serves to throw gas on the fire of distrust that sailors like this have with leadership, right? Particularly with chiefs. All it does is confirm all of their suspicions and all of their prior experience about the mess. Makes them distrust us even more. And then you'll subsequently hear discussions during their first or second years or even beyond, depending on how much scar tissue there is. You'll hear conversations about how that chief like might not fit in, or they don't buy in, or they get ostracized because they're not playing ball with the organization and like basically just buying in because they still don't trust it. It's like, I can confidently say I never fully trusted it at any point during my 11 years in the Chiefs mess. I had a healthy skepticism of all the things that were going on because I saw so much bullshit. Right? Like, I never felt like I was treated fairly. I never felt like we as an organization were truly bought in and focused on what I believe the mission to be. And I don't really see an argument against it, which is the people. Like, the people are the mission. We take care of the people take care of the mission. I never... Like, I maybe, and this might have been just some ignorance and naivete or whatever, however you pronounce that word, when I was a baby chief. But like on Carter, that's probably the closest I ever got to being fully bought in. But it's because that mess was as close as I ever got to doing it right. I think that they actually did care about people, and they actually did care about me and developing me as a leader and all that. So like, I definitely had a kind of a warped idea of what the mess at large was, and confirming that suspicion was, and I've talked about it a little bit on the podcast before, was when I went to shore duty, right? And I got to be put in a position where I was kind of leading that mess most of the time. So I was able to kind of try to like reconstruct some of that culture on that shore duty at the A school. But then when I went to my next submarine, I was out in Hawaii for a wedding, and a couple of my buddies from Carter were like, dude, we got to get together. Not just because we want to see you, but like, we need to prepare you mentally for what you're going to walk into on a normal submarine. Cause I was just going back to a fleet submarine, a ballistic missile submarine. And they're like, you're not ready for this. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm a senior chief now. I'm ready. And it was the preparing me for what like Gen Pop was going to be like. They're like, dude, the mess on Carter was unique and special and not what you're going to encounter most likely on a regular submarine. And it's like, and they were right in a lot of ways. And so it's like, throughout my career, I can confidently say, outside of that one experience, for the almost my entire career, I never fully trusted it. And it's because people give you reasons to. The organization gives you reasons to. The Navy gives you reasons to not trust it. And I think that's our biggest problem. Like, it'll never be perfect, but I mean, trust is the most important thing to this ever working, to you being able to lead people. If they don't trust you, everything else is bullshit. Everything else is for naught. This kid sounds like he doesn't trust chiefs, and he probably has really good reasons to not trust chiefs, even though you could make the argument that he shouldn't, or that she shouldn't not trust all chiefs just because they had negative experiences with one chief. English. But yeah, it's like, but it's also fair. Like, it also makes a lot of sense. Even though, like, we would love for every junior sailor to like be open-minded and give us all the benefit of the doubt, because I'm not the same person as the last person you saw wearing these anchors. It's completely fair that they're judging us that way. So basically what I wanted to get into as well is like the question, the ask here, because like he's like, I'm concerned about the sailor not having encountered any of this shock and awe type stuff, and that the trainings will inevitably devolve into shouting all the ways that he and his fellow slugs failed, and that he fears that this person will crumble and want to try to quit. And then he says, my question for you is, what would you say to those selects that are not fully bought into the idea that they can have a bigger impact and better serve their sailors from within the mess than to take a knee and coast until his separation? Which I'm assuming this sailor in particular intends to separate, but for everyone else's benefit, it really stops at what would I say to the selects that are not fully bought in, and the idea that they could have a bigger impact when they're actually in the mess and they can take care of their sailors and serve their sailors better from inside than outside, right? What I would say is that statement is correct, right? You can better serve your sailors, the Navy, all the things from within the mess, right? And I want to caveat this because I've talked so much about like how I see a lot of value in like high level technicians, that if they wanted to be outside the mess, they could, and just that would be their ceiling for adding value to the Navy, because that's where they want to be. But if you want to be a leader of sailors, the best place for you to be is the mess. And it's a hard sell. Like saying that, like people will probably scoff, but it's still objectively true. I'm not even saying it should be objectively true. I think I think there could be a more of a delegation of powers in leadership positions. Like I think LPOs should be empowered to do a lot more than they are, but we are where we are. And if you want to lead sailors, if you want to have the biggest impact you can in a positive way on junior enlisted and even junior officers, the mess is the only place to do it. That being said, when you're trying to get through to a sailor like this that has reservations for whatever reason, valid or not, which I think most of the time they're valid. I think they're always valid. Even like some sailor might have the issues for a reason that I would argue against, but there still are valid reasons that will exist regardless. So what I would say is like, you have to say the quiet part out loud. Like you have to be truthful about it. Like when I responded to the email, I was like, honesty is the best policy, man, because the conversation I have nowadays is this generation of sailors that are ascending into the mess, like this class or the last few of new chiefs that are ascending into the mess, are so much smarter than us, so much more aware of not just like the leadership development and education being so important, the resources that exist out there, how to leverage them. They have such a high level of knowledge, but they're also just have this awareness of what's going on. And they can smell the bullshit a mile away. So if you come at them with the party line, if you come at them with the like bumper sticker t-shirt version of the Chiefs mess, as if that's somehow reality, or that like we're somehow meeting the ideal and that it's a good thing. You know what I mean? If you just pretend everything's fine, that's just going to compound the casualty. Like that, all that's going to do is like confirm their suspicions in the first place. It's like, yep, it's all bullshit. Like they won't even have the conversation with me when I'm selected to join them. So I think you have to have an open and frank dialogue with all these selects about all of the flaws, like all of the issues. You got to air the dirty laundry and own all of it and just explain it to them. You know, like it's a human organization. Like all of the people that comprise it are flawed, imperfect human beings with woefully incomplete leadership, development, and education. Like they are doing a job they are largely unqualified to do. Most, I would say almost entirely by no fault of their own, like mostly by no fault of their own, because the organization doesn't do anything meaningful to prepare them for it historically. Anyway, they're trying. There's new resources out there. And it's like no wonder, you know, like if you're willing to have those conversations about all the deficiencies and you're willing to admit out loud that leadership incompetence is a real thing and that the organization doesn't prepare people for the roles that they're in, which is why they struggle so mightily. It doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them unprepared. And some of them, I would argue organizationally, like most of them, are ignorant of the fact that they're unprepared, right? They're not even aware of the low level that they're operating at, because they assume when the organization reinforces their behavior with promotions, good evals, awards, all that stuff, that they're doing a really good job. So it's like, of course they're a leadership expert, right? You know what I mean? Like it's a really weird negative feedback loop, you know, like it's a really weird where it's like it exists and it's doing harm, but a lot of people don't even know that it exists. It's like Kaiser Sose, man. It's like the best trick the devil ever pulled was convincing everyone that he didn't exist, right? Like it's, and the Chiefs, I think most of them know something's wrong, but are unwilling to say it out loud because they fear the reprisal of the organization. I don't think there's a way to get this done without being honest about it, without being willing to sit down and have the conversation with your selects about what the Chiefs mess really is, what the issues are, how to navigate those things, and that, yeah, I mean, just like the entire average of a decade that you spent scraping and clawing your way here, you're going to spend the next average of a decade scraping and clawing your way through the mess and the experience of being a chief. It's not going to be perfect. It's not this magic carpet ride where you can just pick up the phone and call the homies and we just make all the problems melt away and you're sitting in the mess drinking your coffee and going home at 3 p.m. It's just not that. Like you're still struggling just as hard. You're just doing it in different ways. A lot of it happens behind a closed door. So then your sailors don't see it. And so they don't perceive you to be working as hard as them. And that's another burden you get to shoulder. Like you're very alone in a lot of ways, but then you do have an organization of people that are suffering through the same adversity that you can rely on, that you can lean on, that you can ask for help, and you should ask for help. But it is imperfect. It is flawed. It is dysfunctional. It is everything that every human organization that's ever existed is. And when you break it down into subunits, right, and you're on your ship, the culture of that mess it can be incredible. You'll probably encounter one that's operating at a high level at some point, whether you're a part of it or you just interact with it. It's possible. They're out there. There are high functioning messes that do a great job, and they still have their warts, right? But it's kind of like, I know a lot of this it feels obvious as I'm saying it, but it's like human organizations are imperfect by definition. That's just how this works. So you have to be willing to admit that out loud and stop pretending that we're some leadership ideal. Stop pretending we're the backbone of the Navy and results, not excuses, and all that shit. It's like, it's not real. It's just somebody decided to make pride stuff because they thought being a chief was cool. And it is. It can be incredible. It can be magical. Like, you can do some really just like, there's stuff I look back at that blows my mind. The impact I was able to have on people, the positive force I was able to be in people's lives because I was in that organization and I was wearing those anchors, because within the organizational structure, I have unique powers and abilities and influence, right? And I get to use that for good, right? If I know how, if I have the tools to do that, right? Or whether ignorantly or on purpose, you can use it to do harm. So it's really important to have these conversations with these selects and just make them understand the potential, both negative and positive. Make them understand the reality of what this organization is. But the way you would sell them on it is the capacity for good, the opportunity to do good, which, even though you're operating within an organizational structure and a lot of the things that you're going to try to do, you're going to need other chiefs to get it done. A lot of it can be done by an individual, right? Like, you can decide that you're going to wield the influence trusted in you by the organization to do just the maximum amount of good you can possibly do in a positive way for sailors. And it's like, you get to decide what that looks like. You get to decide how you interact with these people on a daily basis. You get to decide how you treat them. You get to decide, there's a lot of things that deeply impact the day-to-day experience of junior enlisted sailors in the Navy that are unilaterally controlled by chiefs. You get to be the person that's in control of those levers, so you can use them in good and bad ways. And sometimes, like, what you're going to need to do is not going to be popular, but if you do it all right, or as close to right as possible, consistently, sometimes when you pull those levers and it's going to cause pain, it's like you're drawing on the goodwill of all the things you've done up to that point. And so the sailors don't hold it against you. They're just like, yeah, we know this is going to suck, but like, every person wearing a uniform knows they signed up for suck. Like, they know they signed up for a really hard job that's going to be stressful, and they know they're going to have to put their back into it sometimes. So if you take care of them on a regular basis, when you need to pull that, I need a little bit extra, it's going to be a long day, you know, we need to do this really hard thing for a little while to get the mission done. When you pull that lever, it's not going to cost you much, if anything, right? Because those sailors trust you, they believe you have their best interests at heart, and you have the goodwill to be able to pull that lever without a ton of negative consequences. Yeah, the answer is be honest. The answer is the way that you convince them to buy in is the potential for good, the potential impact that they could have, especially when they're good leaders. Like, when they're the good ones, you know, like, and I get the impression that this kid is one of the good ones. It's like when they're like the uniquely good ones, where you just look at them and you can see the potential chief that they have in them, and you're just like, oh God, this kid has to. You have to. You have to do this, man, because you'll be so goddamn good at it. And it's and the individual still has to make a decision, right? Like, you're not going to win them all. Some of these people are going to decide it's just time to go home. That's what I did at the end of my career. I had people looking at me like that, going, dude, you have to be a cop. You're going to be so good at it. Like, that crew is going to love you. And it's like, I would love that. And I would love for that to be true. And I would love to experience that. But also, I needed to go home for me. Like, I didn't have the juice to do that. I didn't have it in me. I was falling apart. And it's like, and I'm still picking up the pieces. So it's like, some people are going to go home anyway because they need to. Not everybody's built for a 30-year career. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't explain all these things to them. You give them all, just like a chief does for a CO, you give them all the best information that you possibly can to prepare them to make the best decision they can for themselves, or in the case of a CO, like for the crew and the mission. But yeah, just be honest with them. And the selling point, while you relay it in the context of all the information, right? Like all the negatives and the positives, the win, if the sailor really wants to lead people, the thing that's going to tug on their heartstrings is the capacity to do good and use examples. Like, that's like on the, I don't know if it was, I think it was maybe the dichotomy episode. I don't remember which one. I was showing my charge book, all the mementos, all the examples of all the things that have happened. And I just have stacks on stacks of these things, not just from the podcast, but from me actually being a chief. And that's most of what's in my charge book. And it's like, you can show them, like, you don't have to just believe my words. Like, I can hand them my charge book and walk away, and I'll come back and they'll have that understanding of the opportunity they have to do just a preposterous amount of good, right? You have the ability to do some incredible things. So yeah, man, I just think that it, like, one, it's not a decision to participate or not. Like, it's a mandatory training event, but that's not really the point. The point is, when you're trying to get somebody to buy in, because even if you tell them it's a mandatory training event and you just like force them to go through it, that doesn't mean they're going to give a shit. That doesn't mean they're going to be switched on and engaging in the process. And that's what we want. For better or worse, by the way. And I think I discussed this recently too. It's like, you want them bought in and engaged in the process. That doesn't mean the process is going to be all productive, right? Excuse me. You need them engaged and bought into the process so that they can learn from it, so that they remember it, so that they can analyze it and decide on the other end of it what was positive and what was negative, what was good and what was bad, right? And provide feedback on how we could do better. And then they have, like, your experience as a select is going to inform every experience you ever have as a chief when being one of the facilitators of the initiation process, which I hope we rename. You need to be paying attention so that you remember as much of it as you can. I would encourage you should be taking notes and writing stuff down and journaling well in your charge book so that you can look back on all these things for context later, and it can inform how you like move through that process in the future and how you influence it and how you engage in positively changing it, right? We want it to evolve. It needs to evolve. You're supposed to be better than the last generation of chiefs. That's the point. That's what lessons learned and experience and all this stuff is all about, right? So, and this is something I've been talking about recently, and Damo mentions on the episode that I'm struggling through editing. It's like, we don't want you to try to warp yourself to fit in some type of chiefly mold, right? We want you. Full stop. We want you to come into the mess and bring everything that you have with you and apply it to being a chief and help push it all forward, help inform and educate and evolve this process, this organization, everything, and move it forward, right? Like if we just continually, like if you're just in an echo chamber and you're just continually doing the same crap, which I think the Chiefs Mess is guilty of to a large degree, which is why we have a lot of the problems that we have, is like we're just stuck in the mud. You know, like we're stuck in this steady state of a version that doesn't work, right? And so we don't need you to change who you are to fit into the mess, which is what it's going to feel like a lot of the times that they're trying to accomplish during the season and beyond, right? But we need you to come into the mess and make it better. That's the whole thing. Because if I did my job right over that average of probably 10 years, for you to get to that point, I've been preparing you the entire time for the chief part and to be better than me, so that when you get there, it's just you coming into the mess and sharing all that with us and making us better by just the addition of you wearing anchors. You should not be trying to like warp yourself or like fake it till you make it or any of that bullshit. You should not have to do that. You should already be largely prepared. If you're not, remediate that. Everybody's got weak areas. Use this podcast, use all the other podcasts, use books, use the courses, go to NLIC ELD, go to all the things, right? But like, come as you are, right? And another thing that I've been thinking about recently in having these conversations with a lot of different people about their willingness to like accept the mess, right? Which is a weird thing to say. A lot of people view acceptance through the lens of the mess is accepting you. One, and I've debunked that in the acceptance episode of Teaching the Creed and a bunch of others about how it's a symbolic moment of self-actualization, right? But it is more about you accepting us than it ever is about us accepting you, right? Again, literally, because you've already been selected. We already told you were good enough to be a chief, so there's no acceptance needed. But also, when you think about how the whole process works and you think about where a selectee comes from and the process and all the things we just talked about, right? All of them have some level of angst and distrust towards the mess, right? So it's at the end, it's about you deciding to accept us as we are and accept that you're going to be a part of and accept navigating through this imperfect, flawed organization comprised of imperfect, flawed human beings, right? You meet us where we are, right? And that's really important because we talk about as leaders, you need to meet the people you're trying to lead where they are and then try to bring them towards where they need to be, right? But you can't just say, like, this is the bar, get there. Like, that's not ever going to work. You need to meet them where they are, and then you need to do all the things to prepare them, give them the tools and understanding and build the trust and authentically communicate and all the things and bring them towards where we need to be. But we always meet them where they are. So if that's the case, where as a leader, wherever my junior sailors are, right? Even if they're the ostracized shitbag that everybody hates, right? I don't care. They're mine. I'm going to meet them where they are, and I'm going to bring them to their ceiling if I can, right? If that's what I'm doing with them, why would that not be what I'm going to do with an organization like the Chiefs Mess? Should we be better and should we have higher? Yeah, okay, sure. I'm with you. I think that the Chiefs Mess should be striving for a lot of the ideal that people have in their head. And I don't think we're doing that in the ways that we should be. But we are where we are. You can affect a just asinine amount of good inside the mess that you can't always outside of the mess. You'll make the mess better by being a part of it just as you are. So why would you not be willing to accept us exactly how we are? You got to meet us where we are And then when you accept us, you can then start affecting all the change that you've wanted to see throughout that first 10-ish years of your career, right? All the things you said about, when I'm a chief, I'm going to do this, or my chief's an idiot, why don't they do that? Or I can't believe the chief smith does this bullshit, or why is initiation this way, or any of the other things that you are so critical of. It's an opportunity for you to change it, right? Like, I always hated on boats when people would have the door to the mess closed, and then sailors would have to knock on it. It's really intimidating. It's a barrier to entry. It's a barrier to them communicating with their chiefs, to telling them things. I remember being scared shitless, standing outside the door of the mess, having to knock on it to like find my chief, right? It's intimidating. If I had been a cop on a submarine, I would have took that fucking door off the hinges. Who's going to stop me? There wouldn't have been a chief's table either. Like, chiefs would have just had to get in line with Gen Pop and eat, unless they were an oncoming watchstander, right? There's no 5 minutes early for the meal. Fuck you. Leaders eat last. So if you're not oncoming, get out of the way and let all these enlisted kids eat. The oncoming watchstanders, and then all the offgoing people that have been doing the damn thing for 8 hours, right? Like, you're not special. You don't get your own table. Like, no. Sit down and eat with your sailors. Get to know them. Build trust, authentically communicate, all the things, right? Like, and it probably wouldn't have been popular, but it would have been what happened. And so, like, that's the kind of thing that I would have done differently in that position had I stuck around, right? You can do things like that. I mean, like that in particular, you'd have to stick around like 20 years probably. But like, you see my point. Like, when you're in the mess, you're in a position to do the things. When you're in those roles as chiefs, you're in a position to do it differently, to do it better than the chief that you saw do it, that's probably so negatively impacted your experience or the experiences of your friends or both, right? So, yeah, I'm going to stop there. I think that answers the question. I mean, I hope it does. If it doesn't, hit me up. dgutspodcast@gmail.com. You can Facebook message us, Don't Give Up the Ship Podcast, or you can DM me on Instagram, Reddit, or Discord @dgutspodcast. If you want to support us, you can go to dgutspodcast.com. There's a donate button on the upper right-hand corner of the website. Or you can go to Don't Give Up the Ship Apparel. It's dgutapparel.com. Get yourself some Naval Pride and Heritage gear you'll actually wear in public. There's stickers and bags, and there's even shower shoes for submariners. All kinds of cool stuff there. So check that out, dgutapparel.com. And then you can go to patreon.com/dgutspodcast. Pick one of the 5 tiers and become a member today. It helps us a ton, paying the bills and expanding the platform. If you can't spend any money, which I totally understand, you can just support us by listening. You can support us by liking, sharing, subscribing, reviewing on all the platforms for all the things. Subscribe on YouTube, share the videos, share the podcast, tag your friends in social media posts, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, whatever your thing is. It all helps. It all helps get the message out to the people that need it. And we really appreciate whatever you can do. And that's it. That's what I got for you today. Thank you so much for listening, and don't give up the ship. Hey, shout out to all our level 5 patrons, Victoria Livingood, William McIver, and Mark Gallegos. To all our other patrons, we really appreciate your support. Helps to pay all the bills, expand the platform, and we couldn't do it without you. Thank you so much. Hit the like button, drop a comment down below on what you thought, and subscribe to the channel.